Welcome to Tuesday, November 20th, the Board of Selectmen meeting. Now, we had executive session at 6 o'clock to discuss things that were detrimental to the public, so we're already in session, but at this time, before we get started with our regular session, I'd like to stand and salute the flag, please. Please join me.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. I'm just looking at the official time, 7:05, perfect. So we're slightly behind, but we're gonna jump right into our regular session, and the first order of business is street speed limit reduction presentation. Gentlemen.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, I'm Kevin Hardiman. I'm the town engineer. I know a lot of familiar faces up there. Mr. Montour is going to be loading the presentation of the speed zoning study. Just to,
And good evening. I'm Brian Gilbert, Director of Public Works.
And I guess before the presentation loads, maybe just give us some insight into the presentation, because I know this was a kind of a long body of work.
it was. So what the purpose of this presentation is to look at the speed zoning study that we had done in town on 6 of the major roads, and present the information, and then present our recommendations to the board for locations where we feel that the speed limit should be reduced. And then on top of that, I'd also like to speak about the Municipal Modernization Act that was passed, and the laws that are encompassed in that the town could use if approved at town meeting to further reduce speed limits on other roads within the town.
Very good. I think the presentation's loaded. I think we can jump right in, guys.
So I just spoke about the purpose of the presentation tonight, is to present the findings of the investigation, present our recommendations, and also talk about the Municipal Modernization Act speed limits. So the study locations were the 6 roads: Andover Street in its entire length from Lowell to Andover, East Street on its entire length from Main Street to Shawshene Street, Livingston Street, again, entire length from Main to North, North Street from Main Street to Andover Street, Shawshene from the Billerica line to East Street, and Whipple Road from the Billerica line to the Lowell line. So here's a map of the locations in town. As you can see, they are probably 6 of the most heavily traveled roads, with the exception of Main Street in town.
Just for a point of reference, when was the study done? I don't know what was the starting date, but it was quite some time ago.
2016.
2016,
When we started
thank you.
to collect data. Yes. So the speed regulations that are enacted in Massachusetts fall under Mass General Law, Chapter 90, Section 17, which defines speed limits in school zones, thickly settled and business district, other ways outside of the thickly settled and business district, and divided highway. For the most part, the roads in town are within thickly settled or business districts. There are a couple roads that are outside of that, which would have a speed limit of 40 miles an hour. But for the most part, under Mass General Law, the statutory speed limit would be 30 miles an hour. So there's an additional regulation, which is Section 18 of Chapter 90, which allows municipalities to petition the state to establish statutory speed limits. What needs to be done is an engineering study to figure out what the safe speed on that road would be. It starts with the 85th percentile speed of the vehicles that travel along that roadway, and then takes into account crash history, geometry of the road, and one other factor, which is test trials on that road by, it's almost like a blind test, not blind as in not looking, but a driver goes down the road and doesn't look at their speedometer and figures out what the safe speed for them to travel down that road is while someone else records their speed. Then the town can go to Mass DOT to request a speed limit for that road. If Mass DOT approves it, it comes back to the selectmen to adopt it, and then gets filed with Mass DOT and the registry. So it's a multi-step process, and this is the first step in that process.
Have we ever done that before?
Yes, we have. So the next slide shows the dates in
There we
which
go.
5 of the 6 roads have statutory speed limits that were established, dating back to 1954 on the oldest on Andover Street, and the most recent is North Street in 1977. So these speed limits are 41 years old at the newest. So,
If I could add that there are other streets in town that also have
Yes.
statutory speed limits as well.
right, which were established as recent as 2014 for other roads. So looking at Andover Street, it's broken down into 3 speed segments. It starts at 40 miles an hour at the Lowell line, up near the Dewing School, kind of the center section of that, Dewing, Fisk Street, North Street. It's a 35-mile-an-hour zone. And then on the Andover side, it's a 45-mile-an-hour zone. So we went out and measured the 85th percentile speed for those segments and found that on the Lowell side, the 85th percentile is actually higher than what the statutory speed limit is on that road, as is the center section. And then on the eastern side, on the Andover side, the 85th percentile speed was slightly lower than the statutory speed limit. It's probably due to the light cycles down there and the amount of businesses and traffic it encounters. So we're coming to the board with proposed speed limits from end to end on that road of 35 miles an hour. That takes into account the crash history, the geometry, and also that we'd like to see a consistent speed limit along that road. You know, there is a school on that road, there's a lot of additional housing on that road, and even more projects being proposed at this time. So we're coming forth with a speed limit of 35 miles an hour from end to end. And this is just a map of that roadway. You can see on the left-hand side, you've got kind of a double line where that speed limit is going to go from 40 down to 35, and on the right-hand side, it's going to go from 45 down to 35. Shawshene Street has 9 different speed zones along its length. It goes from anywhere from 25 miles an hour up to 40 miles an hour on the straighter stretches. Measured the 85th percentile along sections of Shawshene Street and found that it falls at or slightly higher than the statutory speed limits out there. But we feel that based on the crash history along that road and the geometry, that those speed limits should be reduced. So the proposed speed limits vary from 25, which is existing and will remain, to 35 for the areas that are either at 35 that would stay, or the 40-mile-an-hour zones would drop down to 35. And some of the 35-mile-an-hour zones would drop down to 30-mile-an-hour zones. So as you can see, it's either no change or a 5-mile-an-hour reduction in that speed limit along its length.
And just for the residents and for the audience, this is all based on facts, studies, analysis, data gathering. What would be the argument to say, you know something, we don't agree with this particular segment? You know what I mean? What would be, you know, because you said it's 9 segments for this particular, for Shawshene Street here. Would there be a debate per segment, or are we going to take all of the recommendations from segment 1 through 9, you know, as like for one road? Or would you have a debate segment for segment? This is my first time through this, that's all.
Well, I guess that would be up to what the board would feel is appropriate. You know, this is our engineering study and the analysis that we had done. These are our recommendations based on the factors that we look at.
Okay.
But if, you know, for some reason that felt that these numbers were too much of a reduction, you know, then it decide if that outweighs the engineering.
The state will look at it segment by segment.
Right.
That's how they will approach.
Well, essentially, if we present this to the state, that would be the next, if we make
Yeah,
a motion or not.
right, right.
This is kind of coming from the state, is that accurate?
No, it's not coming from the
They
state.
would have to approve it.
They'd have to approve
They'd have
it.
to approve it, right. This is based on the state's criteria for the study.
That's what I'm probably jumping ahead, but why would they not approve it? You know, why would they say, you know something, we see segment here, or segment 3 is 40, we're recommending to drop down to 35, you know, something, we don't think that's right. Like, why would they not go along with the recommendations, I guess?
I can't really tell you. I hope they don't question the engineering study. I think the engineering study was done to their specifications, and I couldn't see a reason why.
But again, the purpose of this study was to look at roads where speeds should be, there are instances where we looked at roads and the speed limit was 10 miles an hour less than what the vehicles were traveling on that road. Those aren't recommendations we're making to increase speed limits. This is
Right.
strictly to just reduce for safety.
Yeah, I guess I'm not saying it. All I'm saying is, I know Shawsheen has been a big contention, and we know this study's been ongoing for a couple of years. I mean, we're using data, facts, and analysis to come up with this. We're not just making it up, that's all. I mean, so like, who am I, again, I'm just speaking for myself, as an individual on the Board of Selectmen or a resident to say that should be higher or lower? I mean, we're using standards here for a reason, per the state.
Right, correct. Yeah.
So just, Mr. Chairman, if I might, my recollection's a little hazy on this, but when we started this process, I think there was some speed limit changes that we initiated, and there were a number of residents, and my recollection is Shawsheen Street was one of the primary areas where there was concern registered about increased speed postings, and maybe in some cases actually where speeds were decreased. Did that feedback play into any of this process and decision-making? I think at the time, there was kind of a misalignment between what we had posted as a town versus what the state had previously approved, if I'm thinking back now correctly. But that kind of brings to the forefront the practical use of the road in today's world versus what the posted sign speed limit was. So you go back to my first question, did resident input get factored into this, and how would that discussion play out now with respect to what you're presenting tonight?
It did. As far as Shawsheen goes, that's a great example because there were postings on Shawsheen Street for 30 miles an hour. And when we did our sign inventory and took that information, compared it to the speed limit regulations that we had previously approved, which I had in the list from, the 70s and earlier, there were inconsistencies, and we were required to remove those 30-mile-an-hour zone signs and put up the 40s, which were the approved speed limit. So there was a perception that we were increasing speed limits in town. However, they were incorrectly posted. But that really made us want to hone in on those areas and figure out, okay, what should the speed limit be?
Yep.
And the first thing that we did was we did radar on those roads and came up with that 85th percentile. And then tried to see what we could do to add in geometry and crash history to reduce it further to make it as safe as possible.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we didn't reach out to residents to get their input per se. This was more done from the studies, the engineering studies, and presented here.
Right. But we did receive a lot of comments when those signs were changed.
Right.
And that was kind of the input that we took as,
Right.
people were looking to have that reduction.
So you effectively put it back to the way it should have always been, and then you're now proposing to right-size it to today's use,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
All right.
I know that you said with the end of the street it should be all one, and I realize that Shawsheen is much larger, but I don't know where the segments end or start, so why wouldn't we want that to be one size?
For Shawsheen, because the geometry lends itself to changes in speed. you know, on curves. And when we get to Whipple Road, there's a great example at Pleasant and Whipple where there's a large curve. We're trying to reduce that. But other sections of Whipple that are straight and clear, you know, they lend themselves to a higher speed limit.
And there's activity as well that goes on in some of the areas along Shawshene Street that we're trying to reduce because of the activity.
On the next slide, those are the segments, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Mr. Kramer, this, I reviewed these things many times, so when we're discussing this, DOT will look at this at a number of factors, and it will be not only that street, but it will also be the surrounding streets that are abutting them. So if you have a main thoroughfare that's coming out, say like you get a lot of traffic that comes off of Bridge Street, they're gonna take that into consideration. There's every yin has a yang. So if you're reducing the speed limit to a certain speed on that, it's going to impact the surrounding streets around it. So they will look at how does this not only impact Shawshene Street, but how does it impact Main and Shawshene? How does it impact Dascom and Shawshene? How does it impact the surrounding streets that cut through there, the main thoroughfares that go lead to another area? So they'll look at, okay, if it's 20 miles or 30 miles coming off of this street and we're lowering it to 20, is that gonna impact that other street? You know, what's going on? And that's how they do these analysis. So when he's talking about doing the 85 percentile, that's what they want. So they want to see in certain areas that the speed limit will work in those areas. So some places have to be 30, some places have to be 40, just to keep the flow going.
Got it.
And, you know, the state is always gonna wanna go with what moves the traffic. You know, we're looking at, as a town, we're looking at it as a safety factor. You know, we're looking at, we wanna try to reduce it. I mean, I know almost I don't know anybody on the board who hasn't got a call from somebody that said, people race down these streets and we'd like to, you know, make it safer. And I think we tried to do that at one time, bringing it to town meeting to discuss those type of things, to adjust them. So I think this is a great study that by going by what the state regulations are, going by the 85 percentile, it keeps the free flow of traffic not only on all these streets, but the surrounding streets as well. And everything will be analyzed. It won't just be, there could be a place where they may say no because of the impact it may do to a certain other area. And that's the only reason they would turn it down. It wouldn't be because they're disagreeing with the town. They're gonna look at, does this impact another signal or another intersection where people are backing up into another roadway? So that's where they come up with these type of things.
Very good.
So the next road is Whipple, and this is an area where speed limits vary from 25 to 40 along its length. Looked at the 85th percentile, and anyone who's driven on Whipple Road knows that traffic goes a little faster than the posted speeds out there. But we're proposing to make a couple changes. On the Lowell side of things, the 40 miles an hour seems to be reasonable, so there'll be no change there. The 35-mile-an-hour zone near Rogers Street and down towards Long Pond, we're proposing to kind of split that to 35 miles an hour, and then as you get closer to Long Pond into the bends, we'll drop that down to 30. Currently, it's 25 at the intersection of Pleasant and Whipple, and we're looking to keep that around the bend. And then on the other side of that, it's going to be dropped from, it currently goes up to 35 just as you get around the bend near the parking and just before Pond Street. We're looking to create a 30-mile-an-hour zone to extend that down towards the southern end of Ferncroft, so that you have more of a gradual increase to let people out of Pond Street, which can be an issue, out of that road as well.
So
Slight
regardless
changes.
of which direction you're coming to the Pleasant Street area, it will be a descending speed limit, and then it will accelerate that.
Correct. So you can see the minor changes at the Long Pond area on the map, where it's 35, and we're going to drop that down to 30 and keep that 25-mile-an-hour section in the middle at the intersection.
Okay. So the only reasons of lowering those is the sight distance in those areas. So we're gonna talk about.
Correct, yeah, it's a geometry issue out there. So those are the recommendations that we're making for speed limit adjustments in town. If there's one, to have discussion on that before getting into the next section, or if there are any other questions.
We can jump right in.
So back at Fall Town Meeting in 2016, there were two articles on the warrant. One was to adopt Mass General Law, Chapter 90, Section 17C, which would allow the town to establish 25-mile-an-hour thickly settled and business district zones in town. That was a reduction of 5 miles an hour from the current regulation. It would be something that the town could enact and wouldn't be townwide if it didn't want it to be. They could enact it and put it in place on certain streets. We'd post signs, black and yellow signs, letting motorists know that there's a reduced speed on those streets. Unfortunately, when that article was brought forward, it was defeated by a slim margin. And it's something we'd like the board to reconsider bringing forward again. In addition to that, Section 18B is something where the town can establish safety zones. Those can be near schools, playgrounds, things of that nature, where they feel that the speed limit should be 20 miles an hour. That, again, is something that, if adopted, isn't townwide. It's can be dictated by the Board of Selectmen as to where that speed limit zone would be established.
So just a recommendation here, would bring these back forth to the next town meeting for another vote, potentially.
Right. Yep. So, kind of an overview of 17C is that, you know, the town can establish the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit on thickly settled and business district zones, which, as I said earlier, encompasses most of the town. And like I said, it doesn't have to be implemented town-wide, although some municipalities in Massachusetts have selected to do so, but it's not required. Next slide, you can see some of the municipalities that have adopted Section 17C to establish those 25-mile-an-hour zones. A good example is Billerica, right next door. It's a community that has adopted it, but has chosen to do it only on select roadways. And they've got about a handful of roads that they've that speed zone on.
I think that was the confusion from my original question. We didn't have the authority as selectmen or as a selectman to make changes because of those two articles failed. Hence, we had to wait to the study, wait the study to complete, take the recommendations, and then put those forth to the state, correct?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
However, the recommendations for the previous presentation on the 6 different streets, those would be statutory, those would be under Section 18. They would be posted with a black on white, and it's a statutory speed limit. There's fines that are different for 17 and 18. We don't have to say over statutory, or, excuse me, on special speed zones under 18. What this would do is give the selectmen the option of reducing a particular speed limit to 25 under 17.
Understood.
The different authority.
When this did, I honestly don't think we did a very good job getting information on what the governor had passed and why we were doing it. And I don't know if the residents understand, like, if you could give an explanation, the only other way, if this does not pass a town meeting, then the only other way that we have to do this is to implement a speed study and then send it to DOT and then ask them to approve it. And once this failed, I kind of chuckled because some of these towns were in the local newspapers saying how they implemented speed reductions in their town, and that the selectmen had voted on it. And I got calls saying, why don't we do that? And I said, it was voted, because the residents voted it down. And they're like, we didn't understand. They literally, I was told they didn't understand it, how it was to be implemented. I mean, when we do a traffic study, just to do a simple traffic study on each road, how much does it cost for the town to go and do a traffic study that we have to send to DOT?
So for the traffic study that we did for these 6 roadways, noting that project managers at the DPW did the field portion of it, and then we had another company come in and look at the geometry and crash data, it was, I believe, $17,000 for that study for the 6 roads. But there is some economy in scale. If we were to do it for one stretch of road in town, it'd probably be about $5,000 to do that one section.
And the way we can implement it, it's, some of these places are common sense. And we get calls that it's a school. We want to lower the speed limit near a school, or we want to lower the speed limit near a senior housing, or we want to, or by a church or some other thing where it's common sense, where there's locations that we have the ability to lower it by 5 miles an hour to make it safer. It could be the geometry of the roadway, it could be because of what's out there. Those are the type of things that we have to explain to the residents, that it's not that the selectmen are trying to say we're trying to lower the speed limit in the entire town, but the residents coming to us also and asking us in certain areas, they want to do that. And if it doesn't pass town meeting, we don't have the ability to do that. So we have to try to get that information out, that we're not doing it to try to slow down traffic or doing those things, we're trying to make it safer in different locations. And I think we need to really push that out and say, this is not only is it a cost saving, it's a life saving issue that we're doing. And it isn't like we're trying to put, speed traps out there, things out there that people, that the residents have to worry about. We're trying to make certain areas safe. If they come to us and want us to do something, we don't have to spend $5,000 in 2 years, because that's pretty much what it takes. We have to go and do a speed study. We have to hire somebody. They go out there, they do the speed study, they get the paperwork, and we have to send it to the state. We have to wait for them to review it. Then it comes back to us. It takes so long, where if this was passed, we would just have the ability to say, with the recommendation of the police department, safety officers, other people that, safety officials, yourself, the expertise of the people that know these certain roadways, that we'd be able to do it. I think we really need to get that out to the public.
Seems like we have a spokesman for May for the 90 and 17C and the 90 and 18B. Thank you, Mr. Kratman.
Gladly get up there and talk
Okay.
about it.
Yeah. I do know that was something that was mentioned at that town meeting about speed traps. But the process would still be that if the regulation is adopted at town meeting, the selectmen would have to vote to establish it on certain roadways. So there's complete transparency in what roads would be, what roads this would be implemented on through the board.
And it would be just, it isn't like we're doing it town-wide. We wouldn't have to. We could do it in specific areas where we have concerns. And those are going to know, each one of us have received a concern asking us to be able to do that. And at the time, we do not have the ability to do that without that passing.
So the next slide is just a picture of the sign that would be put in place for the Section 17C regulation. And then the next is possible roadways that we've looked at in town that could benefit from this regulation, whether it's the uses along that roadway, its geometry. We field resident concerns and calls just like the members of the board do. And these are kind of a quick list that we came up with of, the locations we should be concerned about and looked at. Yes.
On these locations, does this have anything to do with accidents as well, or is this really the areas that are just more quickly settled? Is this,
It's a little of everything.
Okay.
It's, the director and I sat down and we said, what roads are really on the top of our mind when we think about this regulation? And we came up with this list pretty quick as to whether it was residents who are calling or, we go down the roads and we see that there's geometry deficiencies that can't be corrected through realigning the road, but could be corrected through slowing the traffic down, things like that.
But we would take steps to look at things like that before presenting anything to you. It would be, yes.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I know some of the speed issues or motorist-related matters, they don't necessarily involve residents on that particular street, it could be people passing through. But would you envision, and I think this is probably our discretion, but from your experience, if we were to consider, assuming this were to be adopted, if we were to consider any of those streets on your theoretical list right now, how would you administer that? Do you see, like, for example, a public hearing? Do you see the Department of Public Works notifying the residents of that street of this potential discussion and inviting their feedback, maybe through surveys? Or how would you kind of execute public awareness so that we as a board can make a decision that is consistent with kind of resident thoughts and concerns as well?
I would probably recommend that the residents be notified of the proposed change and bring them in to hear what they have to say. Also create some sort of forum if they cannot come to a public meeting, that they would be able to provide their feedback to us.
Is there any statutory, like, prescriptive steps that must be done, or is it totally discretionary on the part of the local authorities?
Be on the part of the board.
Okay. So just, I know we haven't taken any action, Mr. Chairman, but assuming we were to recommend adoption to town meeting, I just want to ask the town manager to make a note. We just adopted multiple pages of policies, and this would be something to put on the crystal ball if we get to town meeting. It should be something where we need to build a process for the Board of Selectmen to, inform, educate, and invite feedback, and then make a decision. How we go about that, I think we would have to at a later date decide, but I think we should put that on our radar from a policy perspective. And that's making a giant leap that we adopt it or recommend it, and then we get town meeting to support it, but I don't want to lose sight of that.
Makes sense. No, makes sense. Mr. Kratman, do you have something?
No, I couldn't agree with Selectman Johnson that as to the point of getting the notification out to the public and having these people show up and discuss, these are the streets they live on, these are the people that they're going to want to have a say in this. But the police department, looking through this list, I know them all, I've driven them all, and I can pretty much remember at one point or another having one of those signs out there with the warning sign that's saying, speed limit is 35 miles an hour, and all of a sudden you drive by it and you're doing 42. Those type of things where it just happens to be coming around a corner, you take a little hill there or something where, you don't realize your speed is picking up to that speed of what it may be because you're coming around a corner and you get a slope of what it is, and you pick up a little speed there, and you see the sign that gives you a little warning, and you slow down. It's like, okay, you're coming out there. But has the police department have they had input from, I know you said you received, calls from residents or input from people, but has some of that come from the police department recommendations as well?
No, like I said, this list was just something that the director and I came up with, that we wanted to present something to the board where it was tangible. It's one thing to come in with a regulation and say, this is the regulation, but these are the areas that it could apply to in town. So that it would put it in your mind to think, well, what does that road look like the last time I drove it? And how will this affect that? So we have not brought this to the police department yet as far as our potential list, but we wouldn't bring anything to the board without consulting with the police department and working with them to see what their concerns were and what they felt.
I'm just wondering if, like, you get crash data on these selected roadways and those type of things, of what has happened out there.
That would be something that we would get from the police department before we formulated any recommendations. So the last slide just outlines Section 18B, which is the 20-mile-an-hour safety zones. Like I said earlier, it's can be adopted at town meeting and then established by the Board of Selectmen in different locations where, whether it's a intense use that should have slower traffic going by it, schools, churches, places of other types of gatherings, things like that, or playgrounds and those types of things. So, it gives the town the option to reduce speed limits where, study would really be a lengthy process to go through, and it may not provide the results that, the town's looking for.
Any questions from the boards, comments from the board?
I have quick ones. I think this study, residents are lucky that we can have this. As a board, it's a great, we talk about cell phones and speed and kill and all that stuff, so. Doing our due diligence, safety is number one, so I think, look, if there were a change, and we said, we made a mistake on an area, how do you reverse it? Can you?
We would just go through the same process.
Same process. And then, it doesn't affect the school zones or like, that state mandated, like the 20-mile-an-hour zone?
Right, the school zone falls under Chapter 90 for the establishment for first through eighth grade. Right.
And then the communication, Mr. Johnson, like how is it posted, how is the change posted, and how to communicate to residents, that's a huge thing. So, not to get into it, but whether it's policy, and then we bring residents into communication, huge.
Right. So for the statutory speed limits, which we'd have to go to the state for approval on, I would envision that we'd be using our message boards, sending out notices, code reds, things of that nature, to educate the public prior to making, the official posting on the road. Because the last thing we want to do is, set up a speed trap where we put up a new sign overnight and it causes problems. We want to educate the public as best we can on these changes.
Yeah, so I like what you did, I like what you did. I'm all in favor of bringing those 2 hours back to town meeting so we can get board on again, because we're so close. And I think Mr. Chapman brought up some good points, so that's all I have to add, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments, questions, concerns?
I'd just like to say thank you, every time you come in front of me with the traffic study, I learned something new. A little bit too much about traffic these days.
So I understand, Mr. Johnson.
Just one last comment. I think and it shouldn't be lost on residents who might be following this discussion. Part of this evolved out of or originated out of the Municipal Modernization Act that was intended to give these bodies like ours more local control. So we're asking residents to take a kind of a macro look at that and give local control. I don't know that anyone on Beacon Hill, for example, or at the DOT, other than Mr. Crabman, knows Tewksbury roads better than the people in this room this evening. So with your assistance, having local control in this area is theoretically should be beneficial to our community as opposed to relying on somebody else outside of town. So I just don't, there's a benefit to that statute, and we adopted many of those provisions right out of the gate. We've been a little tardy as a community, not because of issues here, but in terms of taking full advantage of that, so we should keep that in mind.
Yeah, just to your point, Whipple and Pleasant, I mean, that's a school road, inexperienced drivers, sometimes you're not gonna see that because it's a half a mile the other way, but, case in point for the residents that live up in that section, we've got many, many calls, and sometimes our hands are tied. So for the order of operation, I understand, moving forward for the next town meeting, the articles, getting a few articles on there, Article 17C and Article 18B. But what about the study now? Are we looking to make a recommendation, a vote here to move this forward to the state level now, based on the study?
Yes.
Okay. And again, that's independent of the 2 articles that we referred to in the back of the...
Correct.
Okay, very good. What is the pleasure of the board?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to move forward and bring our recommendations, engineering recommendations to the state. That's a formal motion.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second that.
Any discussion? All's in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you guys very much. Well done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, before they go, can I just, it might be important just to ask them a question to get out to the public. A lot of work's been going on Route 38, water work. So can you just explain how much longer the work's going to go on, what's going to take place, and that trench that's in the road right now, is that going to stay the way it is? Is it going to, what's going to happen? I think because residents will be asking us.
Thank you. So, As Mr. Montori said, we have been doing a lot of waterline work through the center of town as well as down by South Salem in Maine. The trenches that were put down are temporary trenches. We've walked those as of yesterday and figured out the areas that are deficient and need to be cut out and replaced. So that will be taking place as soon as the weather breaks for us, hopefully next week.
Now,
The way it's going, it might be a while.
As far as the remaining work, we have one more connection to do down on South Street at McLaren Road. That's expected to take place next week, and then that project will be completed to make way for the DOT project that's coming through for the intersection improvements and signalization down there. In the center of town, we have tested the water line today. We still have to chlorinate it and then flush it, but then we're going to hold off on making the service connection tie-overs until next spring, just because the weather is turned on us pretty quick, and it's not really favorable to go out and start digging holes in the road at this time.
now, just to piggyback on Mr. Montori, there have been some complaints, so there's a lot of patchwork through our contractors, right, on 38. You mentioned all the different sections. You know, and there has been complaints from the residents where the patchwork is just, let's call it spotty at best. So did you mention that if it is spotty, you know, because then they put the hot top down, you know, it can settle, plowing season, we're gonna rip it up, do we have that avenue we can call, whether it's a contractor or the state highway at this point, you know, if we do need to make some repairs? Because if you drive on that road, you know, there are sections that are pretty spotty right now as far as the patchwork or the pavement.
Our contractor, under the two contracts that we have for this water line work, is responsible for those trenches through the winter season. So they're responsible. If there's any deficiencies, we call them, they have to come out and repair that. So like I said, the first step is to look at what's out there now, and we've already noted areas that are deficient, and those are going to be fixed. And then as the winter goes on, if there's any more settling or heaving, they'd have to come out and make additional repairs.
In the bigger picture, as I think some of the residents comment, maybe I'll defer to Kratman here, as far as getting hot top from end to end, I know that project's out there, was that the spring of 2021?
Yeah, I mean, for one thing I was going to mention, this isn't the beginning of, I don't want to give the residents a thought that we're going to do this section and it's over with. For one thing, I want to thank you because I've been hounding you to get this done, because the residents want this section of roadway resurfaced. So there's two different projects. I mean, I think everybody's heard, we're doing Salem and South. That is the first project, and that's on next year's tip. So that's not a 2019 tip, so that's the priority, trying to get Salem and South and get that done. I believe we still may need to have gas work done up there.
Yes, we do.
So I don't want the residents to think that we're gonna patch this and it's gonna be completed. There's still a lot of work that has to be done. And it makes sense to do it. The reason that we are tearing up these roadways and they're putting patches in and they're putting other things in, because it needs to be done. The last thing we want to do, not having a road that has been resurfaced over 25 or 30 years, is to have the state go in there, resurface a roadway, and then have a broken water line or a broken gas line. So being proactive as you have, that's why they're out there. They're trying to replace these water lines. They're trying to do what's best for the community. You have to break some eggs. That's what happens, you know. It's just, you're gonna have some problems out there. You have to get the repairs done. I understand it's an inconvenience for everybody, but the long run is to have that road completely resurfaced, having some accommodations, and that's supposed to happen at the beginning of next year. The other project, I believe, is supposed to begin in either the year for, I mean, these things are all depending on the tip. It could be the year after, depending on what happens, or it could be the year after that, if we got our infrastructure done. If we do not have our infrastructure done in those areas, the state will not come in, and they'll move it to the next year. So we have to work hard. We have to have them out there. Unfortunately, we put the money aside, and everybody's always asking, why do we have these retained earnings for water and sewer? Well, this is what we've been saving it for, to get these projects done. So I think you're doing a great job. I understand the contractor has to go out there. This time of year, it's never easy. You put something out, it settles. The ground gets cold, the ground gets warm, and the patches settle. I understand what they're doing out there. Believe me, I have my guys out there plowing that road. And I know you've been following them and keeping track of them, and keep an eye on the contractor. So I don't think there's gonna be much more work that's gonna be done this winter, because we're getting to that time of year where we can't go out because of what's going on. but I don't want anybody to think that if you go out there and you get a nice patch out there, that we're not gonna be digging up again in the spring, because we will be. So I just want everybody, the residents to know. But the whole game plan is to have that completely repaired and resurfaced, and then have a beautiful roadway that we won't have to touch in 10 years. So it'd be nice to have that. So it's, unfortunately, you have to go out there and do this type of work, but I think it's, a year from now, the residents will be really happy driving through those intersections where they haven't seen them in that kind of condition in over 25 years, so.
Right, and to add to that, I mean, the reason we put down a temporary patch on these water line projects is the water line is 5 feet down. It's nearly impossible to compact that to 100% or 99%, so there's going to be settlement. So we put the temporary patch down and then know that we have to come back and do a permanent patch later on. Because otherwise, if we did the permanent patch now, you'd be settling, you'd have settlement in the road, and it would, the drivability would be reduced. It just would be a waste.
Very good. Very informative, I think, for the residents, so, all right, thanks again, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just before you take the next item, I just want to be certain that we covered all the bases. We talked about adoption of Chapter 90, 17C and Chapter 90, 18B, but we didn't take any action on those two things. The thickly settled districts and the safety zones. I don't know that we need to tonight, but if it's our intention to have articles filed, we're going to need to direct the town manager to do so or take a position on those two at some point. So I don't know
If the board's comfortable in voting to insert those articles on the May town meeting warrant, you can make that motion tonight.
So move. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that in the form of a motion to move
17.
the 17 and 18 into the town warrant article for the next town meeting, 17C.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
I second that.
Motion second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. We're doing some initial work up front. Now, as far as the study, we have to make it,
That's all set.
we already moved it. Very good, very good, okay. Very good. Okay, we ran a little bit over, but that's okay. So jumping back to our regular session here, Mr. Tim Broderick. Come on down.
Brought some friends.
bringing your own chairs.
I think you know my friends. Hi. Thanks for having us. I think we'll be brief. Attorney Patricia Muse and Mrs. Lisa Puccia, they're your two representatives on the Shawshene Valley Technical School Committee. As you probably all know, but maybe not everybody watching at home knows, we are a regional vocational school district. We serve 5 communities, including Tewksbury. So about 30% roughly of our 1,300 or so students reside in your town. We're here tonight, and thank you for having us, because a couple of years ago we were approached by an organization called POWMIA Chair of Honor, which has members and leaders who reside in Wilmington, another one of the 5 towns we serve in the Shawshene Tech District. They asked if we could consider designing and building a POWMIA chair to display someplace in our school, so our students would build a better understanding of some of the sacrifices folks have made in service of our country. Our vocational director, Dave Norkowitz, got together with a lot of our teachers to see if it was something that we could do, and they embraced the project. In fact, Rich Woodlock, one of our carpentry and cabinet-making instructors, is also a veteran of the war in Afghanistan. Actually, when we hired Mr. Woodlock about 10 years ago, he wasn't available to start at the beginning of the school year in September because he was deployed. He joined us partway through the year. So he took this project under his wing, got together with his carpentry students. They designed a number of different chairs. They built prototypes. They settled on this design that you see in front of you. And they really dived into the project and got pretty passionate about it. So when they finished building the first one, they sent it to our auto collision and paint program, where Dennis Rapucci, another one of our teachers, also a veteran, and his students started working with paint and coatings. And when Mr. Rapucci wasn't happy with the results he was getting with the materials he had on hand, he called his paint company, told him what we were up to, and they donated the black paint and the high gloss clear coat that you see on the chair. So the original chair sits behind a velvet rope in the front lobby at the entrance to Shawshene Tech, but at the school committee meeting the evening after that chair was dedicated, with the folks from POWMIA, chairofhonor.org, the committee unanimously voted to build 5 more and to give them to the 5 communities we serve for you to display wherever you choose. And I'm pretty sure you already know how to do it, but we can help if you need any advice on that in any municipal building for any use that you can use to build the same kind of understanding and appreciation among citizens that we're trying to build among our students, and also so that our students who reside in Tewksbury will get that sense of pride and participation, you know, that civic engagement when they see something that they've had a hand in on display in an important place. So that's why we're here. Thanks for making time for us. And how did I do?
Start with the board. Questions, comments?
Well, I was at the presentation when we brought one over to Wilmington, and I immediately said, where's ours?
There's one for everyone.
One crack.
One for everyone.
I did speak with the Veterans Agent. She was very excited about receiving this. I know she has a plan for it. I know she's got an idea. We were talking about at the Veterans Day ceremony, but being the 100th year of the, you know, a different war, we were talking about doing some other things. And so I know she has a plan and dedication and how she wants to do it. And she's talked to, obviously, the veterans. And on behalf of the town, I really appreciate it. It's a beautiful looking chair, and I think everyone appreciates it. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Any comments, Ms. Donovan?
I'd just like to say thank you. It's beautiful, and it is quite, it's stunning. So I really appreciate and thank your students for doing the work on that.
They are the ones to thank. They did it. They do it. We're involved with Habitat quite a bit in Tewksbury, so you may have seen our students around working on some of those projects too, and they do it. If you've seen them in action, the students do the work.
I do believe we're going to put them to use on the Habitat upcoming build for the veterans.
They're
build,
ready.
So we're looking forward to that.
I am, I'm going to pretty much do it all.
So I actually have a son who's a proud graduate of Shawshene Tech, so thank you.
Wonderful.
For that. But they are amazing students, as well as our Tewksbury High students.
I will tell you, this chair means a lot to me, because I did lose 2 uncles during World War II, and I lost a cousin in Korea. My parents are both vets, my brother's a vet, so we all really got on board with this project.
It's awesome. It's impressive. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first of all, welcome. I'm pleased to see you here and your 2 school committee members who represent our community. It's been quite some time, but we're happy to have you this evening. I haven't had a chance to read. I know there's a plaque on the seat of that, but my question that I have for you is, anywhere on that chair, does it recognize where it originated from and give proper credit to the students of Shawshene Tech? And if not, we need to make sure that in perpetuity that's recognized in some way.
That's very kind of you. We did talk about this, and it doesn't. And everyone kind of in our organization, the kids included, wanted it that way because we know who it was made for. It's made for the person who'll never be here to sit in it. But I appreciate the sentiment. Thank you very much. I'm sure we all do.
I don't know if there's a way, Mr. Chairman, or through you to the town manager, that we could put some signage or something on the wall near where this ends up that
Figure out something.
acknowledges that contribution. And I'd be remiss, I know it was mentioned a minute ago about Habitat, but over the years, your school community has contributed a lot to the 5 communities, but certainly here in Tewksbury in various ways. I can think of a number of projects that have been undertaken, so we respect and appreciate that partnership.
We all, I can speak for everyone, appreciate great relationships with our 5 communities. I know the way regional finance works, sometimes the assessment can fluctuate, and it kind of relates to enrollment, but it doesn't seem like it's not linear relationship, so that can be frustrating and challenging at times. But we've just had such good relationships in the communities that we've always been able to work through those things and continue to do what's best for our kids, which is really why we're all here. So
Speaking of that, you're going to really keep that assessment at the right level.
we're thinking conservative this year.
Excellent. Thank you.
We're always conservative.
You're always conservative.
Point well taken on the recognition, but I think that's a class act. I think that's what
Agreed.
it's all about, and what it stands for. So it's, we only asked in the story, about the chair, and the room and how it built. It's not about recognition, it's about everybody's understanding where you're coming from. So it's a great night for Shawshank Tech.
My only final comments are, I mean, I know it doesn't do justice on the TV, but that is impressive. I mean, that is just downright cool. So just on behalf of the town, please thank the students, a sincere thank you, and the veterans, the two teachers, the veterans that made part of it, and thank you guys. Really, really good stuff, so thank you.
Have a
Yes.
good meeting.
Could I just make one more motion to the town manager, since we're giving him lots of directives tonight? If he could also write a thank you letter on behalf of the town in acceptance of this gift to the Shawshank Tech students. I'm sure there's a specific class that.
That actually would be enough. We don't need a plaque. They don't need a plaque.
I'm not giving up yet.
Thank you.
Now, do we have to make an official motion to accept the chair?
I'll offer that motion,
I have a
Mr.
motion.
Chairman.
Do I have a second? All's in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thanks again so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
That's beautiful, yeah. Very, very nice.
Yeah, touch X-ray.
Very
Thank
nice.
you.
It was a pleasure to meet you. Thank you.
All right, jumping down to, I'd like to open up to public comments. Residents, are there any residents who would like to speak? Seeing none, let's move on to new business. I think we have very short order for new business. This is the 2019 Board of Selectmen meeting dates. We had a couple changes. I think the changes are in there. One was school vacation, and we made another change just to separate the two. So with that said, do I have a motion to adopt the 2019 Board of Selectmen meeting dates?
Make a motion to adopt these dates as tentative meeting dates for 2019, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion, I have a second. All's in favor? Aye. Opposed, unanimous. All right, we're gonna jump down to Mr. Montori, Town Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If it's okay, I just want to, I'm going to just go out of order in my report. I'm going to talk about the Regional Emergency Communications Center first. I know there's an individual in the audience who came for that update. It's a very brief update. As you know, we're moving forward with building a Regional Emergency Communications Center on Whipple Road next to the DPW. The project is going through the permitting phase with the Planning Board and Conservation Commission. The Planning Board approved site plan approval the other night, or last night, and we're just waiting for the decision to be drafted. Conservation met last Wednesday night. They continued the meeting, which is what they normally do with their hearings, and we anticipate approval from them at their next meeting in December. Once those approvals are in place, we'll move forward with the final design and bid documents, and hopefully have this out to bid shortly after the holidays for bids to come back over the winter for the project to start in the spring. And then it's a 9-month project from there. So it's on schedule. We received our most recent grant award from State 911, fully funding the construction and engineering and oversight. We'll be applying over the next few months for the equipment for the facility, and we anticipate an award for that sometime next fiscal year to be ready when the center opens. So everything, we're a little bit behind schedule because of some site work, site design we needed to do in regard to the DPW exiting and entrance next door to the new facility. But we believe we're bidding it at a good time, and based on the size of the project and the budget of the project, we'll get a lot of interest in it. So it's moving along. Did I miss anything on that? That's it. So with that, I was going to have the fire chief come up and go over a presentation to update the board on the center fire station design that we're going forward with. As the board knows,
Good evening.
Welcome, Chief.
the town approved $15 million, actually $15.8 million for the design and construction of a new center fire station. The town hired Vertex as their owner's project manager to assist in the project. We hired HKT architects to design the project. The design is underway, moving through schematic design, finalizing what the chief has put together for a program that we'll go through in this brief PowerPoint presentation. And the new center fire station will be located across the street from Town Hall next to the Bank of America. It's a town-owned piece of land that the Housing Authority had a home on. We'll be utilizing some land in the rear of the property that is actually off of Woodland Drive for parking, and the chief will go through some of those details in the presentation. But this project is also moving along, and just wanted to give the board a brief update on it at this point. So at this point, I have the chief talk more about the project.
Thank you very much for having me tonight, and I'm just here to answer any questions that you may have. If you want to go to the next slide, Rich. Thank you. Basically, this is the view of where the fire station, everyone keeps on asking, where is it going to be? And the fire station is going to be immediately to the left of Bank of America, if you're looking at Bank of America. That's how, on the right side of the slide, how the station is going to sit on the lot. You can see where it's a little shifted on the lot, and that's to follow the lot line in the backside easement of where the electric easement is for National Grid. The driveway going into going from Main Street down, we were pleasantly surprised or glad that the water main work took place now. In the state redesign of 38 in that area coming up in the near future, it's going to kind of dovetail nicely into this project so that we can all be on the same page to get the best access to this property. So on the right-hand side, that's some snow storage on the driveway going down from Main Street. On the left-hand side, we're leaving a cutout space there for our apparatus. Whenever we have the apparatus come to the center, we need to have some place to put them safely out of the way so that they can be on-site and available to go. So that's where, turning around and facing out is going to be where the other substation fire engines will come in and stage. On the next slide, this is how it sits and connects to the back parking lot. On the left-hand side is where the parking lot for employee parking is going to come in off of Woodland Drive, off of North Street. So that will be employees only and people that are coming in from off-site for training or whatnot from other departments that may be using our training room for classes that we host within the department and for the fire academy. So that's through an easement. Access to that is through an easement on the back side of the parking lot. On the back side of the building of the fire station. And the connection was made there through a drivable path so that we can maintain it with a vehicle, so there'll actually be a garage door that we can plow into that lot without having to go out onto Main Street. Each of the fire stations have their own plow, and obviously, because it's been snowing out, it's at the forefront of our minds. So each fire station has their own plow to maintain their own parking lots and ramps throughout any snowstorm that happens, so it doesn't take anybody out of position. We used to just have one plow in the department for years, and one person would have to go to all 3 stations through the course of a snowstorm and make sure that they stayed plowed out. So this is a little bit more effective, plus we're able to take that plow and send it with apparatus so that we can access all areas of the town during snowstorms when we need to do that. The tough part of this site is, and we just found this out, looking at the site, walking the site, I've walked the site numerous times, it looks like a nice, flat, level site to me, but I'm not an engineer. So when the engineers got in there and started looking at it, there are 3 points of elevation that they have to deal with: the back of the building, the front of the building where it connects to Main Street, and then the side of the building where it connects to Bank of America. So all 3 of those points have to figure in on how we are going to deal with groundwater and pitches and elevations for apparatus and vehicles to move within the site. So that's posing a little bit of a challenge for the designers in making all those elevations work properly. They do have a plan to do it. It's just a matter of, it's a little bit more, like I said, the naked eye looking at it with a tree lot. It looked pretty, workable to me. Again, not an engineer, so that's something that we're dealing with right now. So that's the site plan and the parking that we have on site. We are using pretty much every square foot of this property that we have available to us. So a few things in the floor plan, when you see the station floor plans, you'll know why they're happening, and it's because of it's a tight site, but it is a viable site for location and for the building itself, for it to be where it is. We've looked at numerous sites throughout the center of town, and one by one process of elimination, we kept on coming back to this site because it offered a lot of pluses to us.
Yeah, and if I just to quickly piggyback on that, because people do ask why you're on this site, it doesn't look like it's going to be able to work. As the chief mentioned, we did look at many sites in the center of town. We looked at the former Nissan dealership up the road. That didn't work from a site standpoint. Plus, the asking price was high. When we took on this site, we did talk to the owner of the property directly behind the site, whether for land sale or swap, and that really didn't work out for us either. We talked to the 2 abutters of the site, one on the front and one on the side, and there really isn't much interest in selling, and if they did want to sell, the price was just not something that the town would be able to justify spending funds on. And we did look at other private property along Route 38 in the center of town. Nothing was available or reasonable. The chief, from his review and study of times and runs, needed to be in the center of town, so this made the most sense. The current site really wasn't workable because then you had to get into how are you going to keep a center station running while you're building a new center station in its place. And there wasn't enough space on that lot because we'd have to take up parking that's pretty valuable for the annex and the town hall. So as the chief said, we kept coming back to this site. So it is a challenging site, like most sites are. The site work is probably going to cost us approximately, they're estimating over $2 million of site work, which is high, not just because of the site challenges that we have, but because the prices and the bids that they're seeing on site work right now are out the roof. There's not many companies that actually just do site work, and the ones that do know they can charge a premium. So that's going to cost us more than we anticipated, and we'll talk more about that as we go along.
Before you move on, Mr. Chairman, just one question about the site. Could you go back to the first slide? Yeah. On this right-hand illustration, there's it looks like, and I think you referenced it for turning vehicles, there's like a curb cut. Mm-hmm. Is that into the Bank of America parking lot?
That is because when you see the floor plan, you'll see why it's like that. On the right-hand side of that building, looking at it from Main Street, the fire prevention office and where the public point of contact with the department is going to be in a shared parking space on Bank of America property. So we need an access point into Bank of America so we can take fire business traffic and put it into Bank of America and then come out enter and exit from our driveway. So yes, there is a connection point there. The apparatus turning point, there are two ways that can happen, is into the Bank of America parking lot or on the front side of where the station is on the ramp, on the front side. So that connection point to the Bank of America parking lot is pretty much for the business traffic that's coming in off of Main Street to the fire station and then exiting from the fire station. And if you see that center line in between the driveway going in and out, that's not a hard berm like you have at the high school where it's a hard granite curb. That's a drivable berm that just delineates, you know, in and out in a direction of travel for the vehicles that are coming in and out in that
Just
apparatus.
as a follow-up, can you explain, or maybe Mr. Montori, it sounds like Bank of America is being a full participant in this process and being willing to partner with you in some way, but
Correct.
can you elaborate on that?
Sure, and actually we're working with two private entities in regard to this project. So we have talked to Bank of America, who has shown willingness to provide parking for about 15 spaces.
Roughly.
Somewhere around there. Mostly right along where the building is, for the chief, deputy chief, the administration staff, and the public. So we're still working out those details. The other group we're working with is National Grid because of an easement that they have in the back of the property for their power lines. We are going to try to work out some use of that space, either for the building or for setback requirements. They're willing to work with us because they're redesigning the power lines in the back of the building, so they may be able to move them for us. But both have been very cooperative at this point. But the key has been Bank of America just to allow us to utilize the spaces.
And I assume you're covered the space, but just out of an abundance of caution, and let me first say, good for them, and thanks to them for, making this site viable because of that resource access. But I assume you'll memorialize that use in some way if
Yes.
there's a change in ownership or the property was sold.
Yes.
I mean, it strikes me that without that resource, this site becomes tenuous, so.
Yeah, if without that happening, let's say something happens and it goes up the chain with Bank of America and
Right.
it falls through, then everything would have to come from the rear of the parking lot, which would make it a rear of the lot off of Woodland, which makes it more challenging. But we would memorialize it to make sure it's some type of a permanent easement.
Thank you. All right, sorry to get you.
No,
Slow you down
this
with
is, the project is coming into play in a few different areas between with the state road work on 38 coming up, the water main improvements that the town made, and also National Grid. National Grid, as Richard said, is doing a revamp of their power lines back there. Eventually, the plan is, from what I understand, is the substation next to the police station is going to be decommissioned and removed. So that will pretty much, I think, there may be a plan that the town
To get
may.
that, they've already indicated to us that once they decommission that power, that substation, they're building a new one in town, which is good. Once they decommission that and remove all the equipment, they'll enter into a long-term agreement with us to use that for parking also.
Would that potentially connect the police station to the fire station in the backside?
We thought about that too for additional parking. We're just not sure if that would work, so we're going to look at it. We need, the police are up against it for parking, and sometimes we are here, so any additional parking we create will be great.
So this is the ground floor plan, and in the previous slide, it did show there's a covered garage space for cold storage in that back parking lot area. And what that's allowing us to do is pull some equipment out of both the center fire station and the sub-fire stations for cold storage. So we're actually freeing up more floor space for, like our trench trailer will wind up going in there, and likely our boat will wind up going in that garage. So the plan for this station here and freeing up some space in other stations, it makes it very workable for us now and down the road in the future. So in this plan, on the right-hand side of the screen, the fire prevention office is on the first floor. The radio room, first aid permitting room, that's basically a place where the public can come in if there's a medical emergency or somebody needs to have a discussion with somebody. The whole right side of the building on the first, second, and third floor are designated as public spaces to the extent of you can access those spaces with being allowed into the building, being buzzed into the building, and it's separate from the other areas. So it's a containment point for the public to be in those spaces depending on what the need is for the person. So on that right-hand side, you have the fire prevention office, which is staffed each day from 7 to 10 o'clock right now with the office hours. We have a lot of people that come in for fire prevention, carrying a lot of plans, and it's usually in and out for permitting, so we wanted to make that as accessible as possible. So there is a stairwell, there is an elevator there that will get you up to the upper floors. The ladder truck, positioning of the ladder truck is where it is, simply because it's the biggest piece of apparatus, and it's the most room for the turning radius back into the station, and then also for the straight shot out. The fire engine, engine 1 will be next to that, and the ambulance next to that. So as you go down, the apparatus gets a little bit more maneuverable as you move toward the left side of the building. The gear room, laundry room, decon, the station is being designed for firefighter safety and for trying not to have cross-contamination of contaminants from gear or from either fire apparatus or from the ambulance, so that we have a decon assembly process going through this to be able to contain that to the best, the best design that we can. So this, the floor space in this building is a little bit more than what the original floor plan was when we did the study back in 2007, 2008. So the floor space is a little bit more here, the building floor space. We're actually using the footprint is smaller, but going up has offered us a lot more ability to expand for programming now and in the future. So it'll allow us room for expansion down the road. The rescue and the boat on the left-hand side apparatus bays, basically that's there because I was trying to give the architect the worst possible turning solutions, or try to come up with the best possible turning solutions, because trying to back up a boat in a tight area is very difficult. So that's why that was placed in there. That boat probably will not physically be there, so that bay will probably house the spare ambulance from the South Station that's down there right now. The command vehicle, car 3, is all the way over to the left, and the brush truck is shown facing going to the back parking lot. Normally, it wouldn't be like that, but for a snowstorm or an impending snowstorm, it would be in that position to plow both from our parking lot all the way back. There is, as you can see, on the left-hand side of the building, there is a slide that's there. And then in the center of the building where the gear, between the gear and the laundry, there's a fire pole there. The biggest concern for me in this layout is response time when the tone comes in. We're going from a station where everybody is around the apparatus room, and all you need to do is go through one door and you're at your apparatus room. So this, we have to traverse either stairs, to go from upstairs to downstairs if you're not already on the floor. The living quarters are on the second floor, so that was a big concern for me. So between the pole, 2 sets of stairs, and the slide, there's ample opportunity to get people to the apparatus as safely and quickly as possible. We do have a workshop area where that boat trailer is showing there. That's basically for preventive maintenance, not preventive maintenance, but some light maintenance that we do. We do have mechanics third-party mechanics that do come on site. This apparatus bay is about 19 feet high, which means we can tilt our cabs inside the building, which is a huge advantage to us. Even the DPW has a hard time right now. If they have one of our apparatus for some reason, they can't tilt our cabs up inside their building, so they wind up having to do crawling space out in the cold and rain and heat in, the inclement weather out on their ramp. So that was a huge benefit to us in this design. On the second floor plan, again, the right side of that building where you can see, right side of the photo where you have the lobby in the permitting and the elevated machine room, that's where people can come up to, where if they have to talk to somebody in the on-duty crew, there's a spot for them to be and go into a quiet area if they need to have a discussion or go over a set of plans, whatnot. The training room off the lobby is accessible from the back parking lot and then also from that front parking lot area. It's separate and distinct from the living quarters, so we consider the training space to be a public space so that we can easily segregate the rest of the living quarters from that training area. To the right of the training area, there's a big open space there, and it's a roof deck. And the roof deck is there simply because we are using every square foot of land to put the building down. So we need to have access for people to go out, get fresh air, and do things that normally you could walk out into the backyard of any of our stations right now. But in this case here, yes, you could go to the back parking lot area, but there's really not any place for firefighters to just kind of get away and get fresh air. So there were two of those. There's one on that right side of the building, and then one on the left side, on the back side, on the wooded side of the lot. And that's off the day room kitchen area. So that's basically just an outdoor area where, think of it as kind of like a outdoor sitting area that you could have, small picnic table with chairs out there. We do run a 24-hour operation, 365 days a year, so this is a second home, so we try to accommodate as much as we possibly could for that purpose for the firefighters that work here. And I will say, I went through each of the shifts and got a lot of great feedback. That feedback went back to the architect, and the architect implemented or made those comments and the input and recommendations that we had from the firefighters. They moved it into the design. So I think we chose a really good architect that's really listening to our needs and what we need now and in the future. They've actually looked into some things and offered more space in certain areas that they knew that we weren't accounting for, that they knew that they had to account for because they've done projects like this before. So as you move up to the third floor, if I can just go back there for 1 second, Richard. There is a fitness room on that bottom right-hand side. In the fitness room, we have in all of our stations kind of makeshift gyms. They're in the center fire station. The firefighters built a fitness room. They poured the concrete slab, just going back to the 90s, early 90s. They poured a concrete slab, put up some walls, put up some brick facade. When New England Brickmaster was in town, they donated some brick facade for us to put up there to make it blend in. So this fitness room is going to have newer equipment, a lot of cardiovascular equipment in it, and it's in a place where people can see people, because from a firefighter health and fitness point of view, we always used to hide the fitness areas because nobody really wanted to be around, but or see it or hear it. But for firefighter safety, as people are using those rooms, if something happens, we want them to be found. So our situation right now in the center fire station, and even in the north fire station, in the south fire station too, south fire station's on the second floor, it's segregated. And we're trying to bring that back and encourage that and encourage physical fitness with our firefighters. The third floor plan is basically administrative. The original plan, the architects had the training room on the third floor. On a daily basis, the firefighters do training, fire station, the substations come to the center fire station. And being on the third floor and traversing down to the apparatus room was kind of not a workable situation for us. It was just too far. They get toned out all hours of the day during trainings and whatnot, so we had to make it so that they could get down there a lot quicker, be more proximate to that. So we moved that training, the training room down to the second floor, which opened up on that upper side for us to put our mechanicals on the back side of the building, and kind of tuck them away a little bit and give us, where we don't have that area footprint on the ground to do some of those, in the mechanical room, in that roof, a walkout door to the outside mechanical space, similar to what you have here on Town Hall with your HVAC equipment and whatnot, so we can have it on the back side of the building, protect it, and also have it accessible and serviceable for the vendors that are coming in. So this is allowing for enough space now, both meeting space for the firefighters, conference room space for the administrative staff within the department, storage space, all in one nice package in the building. It is a good-sized building. It's not going to be like the current building where you could drive by it and, oh, that's a fire station. This will stand out, but I think between Tewksbury Towers, which recently got a little bit of a facelift and is now white instead of brick, so it kind of blends a little bit better. Between that, the police station, Foster School, I think this building will blend right in with the center of town and with the town hall being on the opposite side. I think it's going to blend in nicely. So this is the exterior view of the station. That front left picture is of the front of the station if you're looking at it from Main Street. So you see the two garage doors to the left, and then that middle brick section right there, brick-looking section right there is where the gear room is, and then on the right-hand side are the three apparatus bays. The top picture, top left, is the rear-facing side of the building, and as you can see on the right-hand side, that's that overhead garage door with the pickup truck or plow accessibility to the rear parking lot is going to come out. And then you have on the top right side is going to be the one facing the police station side of the building, and the bottom right is the public entrance where people will be coming off of the parking lot and into the fire prevention office and into that first floor lobby.
So right now, we're looking at bidding the project sometime in the May, June timeframe, hoping to sign a contract with a contractor sometime in the June, July timeframe. Construction will take 52 weeks, based on what the architect's telling us. And HKT has scheduled a design development estimate for sometime mid-December. We'll update it again sometime in January, but that estimate will give us a good idea if we need additional funding. We've been told that project costs for all types of public construction right now are higher than they have been in years. We anticipate that this project could be $2 to $3 million higher than we actually have in our appropriation, which means we'll have to go back to town meeting for additional funding, but we'll know better after the next estimate and any updates after that. So being a public building, and this is something we'll go through, we've gone through with the high school, we'll have to pre-qualify sub-bids and general contractors in December and January. That's a fairly lengthy process and time-consuming process, but it's part of the state requirements. So we hope to have this fully designed and 100% construction documents ready in April for bid in June, July, but it's important to note we may need additional funding, and we're anticipating that we'll probably need additional funding based on the bid climate right now. That's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank Actually,
Johnson?
I do have one question. The chief in his comments brought something to the forefront of my mind, because I've been spending a lot of time on zoning and design guidelines. So the center of town is, you know, a jewel of our community, and there's been a lot of discussion overlay districts in the past, town center. So has your design team, architectural team, are they aware of some of the, you know, goals and objectives and some of the preferences relative to the town center, and has that been considered in the design? I know there's site restrictions, but in terms of the aesthetics.
Yeah, the design team we haven't given them any documents to review from the design guidelines that are being looked at, but the assistant town manager has sat in all the design discussions. So he's aware of what's going on. I think he would have raised any red flags.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. This is very exciting news. I can see you're really trying to contain your enthusiasm for this project. My question is, most of your abutters are commercial abutters, but how about on Woodland Drive? Do we have abutters there that are in residential homes have we reached out to the abutters of this project? And
Yeah.
what's the climate of the abutters? Are they thrilled about this being there? I would think they'd be happy about having a fire station.
Yeah, I mean, there's one abutter that we know of that we've talked to on Woodland Drive, because we tried to do a land swap with them and it didn't work out, but we haven't heard of any opposition or any concerns at this point. So, and there's the rooming house that sits in front of this the proposed building. We've talked to the owner of that location too, and again, we haven't heard any issues. And that's not to say that people won't come out to the hearings, but as of right now, we haven't heard anything.
Yep. Okay, thank you so much. Just want to make sure that we're making sure that they're in tune.
Okay, very good. Mr. Brian Deck? You good? Mr. Mark Kratman?
You're talking about the timing of this. What did you say, you're talking about a design by?
Design should be complete and construction documents ready April of 2019. We hope to be able to bid June of 2019 with work complete by June of 2020.
Because this is going to tie into the work, it's going to be
Mhm.
at the same time as DOT is going to be coming through there.
Mhm.
So we should take advantage of that, obviously.
Oh, we intend to.
Oh, it's just, and obviously, we're going to need a permit from the state to go through
For the
there.
curb
So
cut.
we'll look at that realignment as it's going on. But I'm looking at the island that's not too far from there. And so maybe take that as soon as we get the plans, what I would do is suggest that town get those plans over to DOT so they can implement them because they designed it as is. So if we have something that's, I know it's preliminary, we have not anything, but as we get something, we should put it in there, and maybe we can make some recommendations on some additional realignment to make sure that the trucks can get in and out in a safe way. Look at I know there's a driveway coming across the street from, I think coming out of the back of the funeral home there, right over here, right next to Town Hall. I know there's another driveway that comes out right across the street. So it comes out where that's going to be coming out, so we're just.
Is that the bank's
TD Bank.
exit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, just look at the alignment and make sure, because when they're designing this, trying to plan and to put preemption in there and those type of things, so, the more information we can get, the quicker. When they're designing this, they may want to redesign that intersection in some way, so.
Okay. And just a few comments, I guess, to wrap it up here. We mentioned about the budget. Seems like the site planning could be roughly, give or take, we're looking at an additional $2 million cost on top of
Yeah,
it,
just for site work.
just for site work.
Yeah.
So it's too early to kind of predict the budget, because I think, what was the overall budget? 15.8?
15.8 we have available for construction, design, engineering, and owner's project manager. So the numbers for construction, it's getting tight, so we're just waiting for some final numbers and then the final estimate, so.
Okay, and Mr. Johnson covered it, but it seems like the parking is tight. We talked about the Bank of America, so I'd love to get some type of long-term agreement, easement, before they start charging us, per parking space, because that is tight. I mean, I know they're doing, that's very nice of them and kind, but I'd like to definitely get something long-term there, to Mr. Johnson's point, so we don't, they sell it and all of a sudden we're squeezed and we're there. And last but not least, do we have any, in lieu of the whole presentation, do we have any considerations for the old fire station, what we'll do when we're all up and nice and cozy in a new fire station?
Yeah, we haven't really made any, we haven't started to think about what we want to do with it yet. The cost of demolition, is factored into the overall cost of this project. Right now, demolish it, make it green space until the town, this board decides what they want to do in the future. One of the things that I'll probably be coming forward with in the next, 6 months, once this is underway, just to have the board start thinking about what they want to do with that area. There's no need right now, but
Right, okay.
but it has potential.
Okay, very good. Chief, thank you so much. Any questions before we close, I guess?
Just one comment, if I could, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to send a thank you to Cummings Properties and also to National Grid, the LNG plant that we have here in town. Both of those organizations made donations to the fire department, directed donations. One was for equipment, the other was just for a general thank you to the firefighters for what they do. The Cummings property does an employee directed donation each year in the Cummings communities around us. And so a donation was made today by a young lady that her husband had a medical event that the fire department responded to several months ago, and so she put that in and put us for that. So we used some of the proceeds for that. We just happen to be doing CPR right now and training all our guys, so we're using some of that, the funds that she got, to offset the cost for the guys that for their CPR cards. The firefighters generally pay for their own EMT trainings and whatnot, so we shifted some of that money over toward that, and I think that's pretty much what it was intended for. I think she was pretty happy with the service that she got here. Skip Doucette from National Grid, back well before September, when the incident happened in Andover, he had approached me and asked if there was anything that they could do with us. We're at the LNG plant every year for tours, and Skip is Doucette Field, that's in his family, and so he asked about that, and he gave a donation for gas meters, so that we could have now gas meters. We have combustible gas indicators on all the apparatus anyway, but these gas meters are the gas sniffers the gas company uses to go in and see if your gas stove has an issue. It's a little bit more sensitive. We usually call them to come in with their equipment, so he actually put together the money to have it on all our frontline apparatus, so we have it right there at the point of source of service. So I'd just like to thank those two organizations for doing that for us.
And maybe we can work through Mr. Montori just to send a little gratitude and thank you, to the Cummins property and to National Grid. Thank you very much, Chief. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving. All right, Mr. Montori, we're going to bounce back. I think we have some senior town council invoice and a few more other
Yep. Very quickly, we have the senior town council invoice for September 2018 in the amount of $5,950. I would recommend approval.
So moved, Mr.
I
Chairman.
have a motion, I have a second.
You do.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, unanimous.
We have a town council invoice for October 16th, 2018 through October 31st, 2018 in the amount of $3,060. I'd recommend approval.
So moved.
I have a motion, I have a second. All those in favor? Aye, opposed, unanimous.
And then finally, Mr. Chairman, the town had a donation of land given to them by George Barakis for a portion of a piece of land on Merrimack Drive next to the water treatment plant. The lot that was in question was approximately 48,182 square feet of vacant residentially zoned land, and of that, 37,913 square feet has been gifted to the town from Mr. Barakis to be part of the water treatment plant land. The land donation came with some restrictions regarding setbacks, use of the property. The land had an appraisal done by a private appraiser. The land that we're receiving as a gift had an appraised value of $390,000. We had already gone to town meeting to accept this gift of land, but one of the items that senior town council has brought forward is an IRS Form 8323, which is a non-cash charitable contribution form that needs to be signed as part of this transaction. And I'd ask the board to vote to authorize me to sign that form and give it to town council, senior town council, so we can finalize the paperwork for this donation,
So just a mere formality, if you would.
for the most part.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion, I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
That is all I have. Oh, one quick thing, if I may. That's not on the agenda, but I just want to make a quick announcement. There's been many calls coming into the office regarding leaf pickup, or the lack thereof. The private contractor, Republic Services, is behind in leaf pickup by at least 2 days. They hope to be catching up this week, and we're working with them on extending leaf pickup in town at least another week, but they've committed that they will pick up the leaves in town. They're just behind, but they'll make sure that they get to all the streets that they haven't yet, into houses they haven't gotten to yet. So if residents
Hey,
can be...
wait till I can rake the leaves.
I know. So we're asking residents to be patient with us. We know that leaves are out. They will get to them, but just wanted to let them know they are behind.
Well, that's big, especially that I got calls as well. A lot of these bags were there, now they're wet and they got plowed in, now they're plowed in. So hence the concern from some residents saying, where are you guys? So,
Yep.
so you said we may have to extend that?
The contractor talked about, because they've fallen behind, that they would extend it. I'm waiting for final word on that, and we're going to do a code red to let residents know.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Montori. All right, that's it. Looks like we're, do we have any minutes, Mr. Brian Dick, to approve? Okay. Okay, very good.
Thank
We're going to move to board member reports. Let's start with Mr. Kratman.
Make this quick. Beautification Committee, they're going to meet on the 28th. Old Regional Transit Authority's Board of Directors meeting on 12/6. Economic Development is meeting on 11/26. And I just want to thank, we had a wonderful Veterans Day ceremony held in Town Hall, and I want to thank Lisa Downey and her team that put that together. I want to thank new cable industry person who came through and videotaped it. And hopefully we'll have that kind of information up on our website shortly, and put some new things out so the residents can see it. Other than that, I have nothing else.
Thank you very much. Mr. Stronach.
So the Events Committee is going to be holding the annual tree lighting on November 30th, and I encourage everyone to participate. They're going to have marshmallows and flashy gizmos, I guess, I don't know.
What
I'm pretty
time?
excited.
It's at 6 p.m.
Well,
6 p.m. we have-
Thank you, you knew that.
Yeah, I met with the chairman of the committee today to go over all the details, and sounds like a good event again by
Yeah.
the events committee.
I hope it's as warm as it was last year. It was beautiful. Anyway, it's a good take, even if the weather's a little cold. And the Elementary Building Committee meeting is meeting in full force. Still working on that Ryan site. We did have a traffic study report at our meeting that was quite lengthy, and that talked about the traffic flow of that building, because we are going to be, from what the looks of it, dramatically improving the traffic flow based on some of the work that's going to be doing, because the roundabout will be all the way around the entire complex. So we're hoping that that helps with the morning commute. for residents that are in that area. But we are getting ready to do some submissions to the MSBA that are pretty critical, and those deadlines are coming up as well. So lots of work in that front. And unlike, unfortunately, with the project for the fire station, we're not able to partner with the MSBA, but with the school buildings, we are partnering with the MSBA, and they make a substantial contribution to that project. We do know that our reimbursement will be at 52%, and then hopefully incurring some additional points to get that reimbursement rate up. So I just want to make people aware that that project does have a partner in the state that'll help fund the cost of that project. And other than that, I'd just like to count my blessings for being able to serve the community in this capacity and wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving.
Very good. Mr. Brian Dick.
Just one quick thing, athletic field subcommittee was supposed to meet today at 20th. Meeting wasn't posted, but we will post it and moving to the 27th for the short week. And there's some members that couldn't attend, so we're meeting next Tuesday at 5 o'clock. I'll have an update for the next meeting. That's it.
Okay, very good. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just very quickly, the zoning bylaw subcommittee met last week. We have our next meeting this coming Monday, the 26th. For anyone who's interested, we're heading into the home stretch with respect to review of the draft, and then we'll begin to make some outreach efforts and invite some more public input before we finalize in anticipation of town meeting. So that process continues. And I also want to thank members of the community. This past weekend, the Tewksbury Community Pantry had its annual Thanksgiving meal distribution, and provided a full meal and turkey to, I think it was about 180 households here in Tewksbury, and that's an effort that's supported by many, many people, made possible through donations of food and time and effort. And I want to thank the community for always being there. We've never, at the pantry, had to turn anybody away for lack of resources, and that's a reflection of the generosity and compassion of many, many people here in town, businesses, civic groups, et cetera, schools. I want to commend our community for stepping up to help those less fortunate among us here. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Kratman mentioned the Veterans Day ceremony. That was lovely in town. This past week, we also had a Veterans Day breakfast at the Senior Center, so big thanks to Lisa, all volunteers, and all the local businesses that donated to that breakfast. I think it was 140 veterans plus, so that was a real good event. And last but not least, a big shout out to the Tewksbury Redmen, the Tewksbury High School team. Big congratulations. They're going on to the Super Bowl for the state 3 division champions. So congratulations to Coach Aylwood and all the coaches and all the players. And to the school. I think it's huge that we're going to Gillette on, I believe it's Saturday, December 1st. We play at 6 p.m. So again, congrats to the Tewksbury Redmen, and let's go, and let's go. So with that said, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I do.
All's in favor? Aye. Adjourned. Thank you, guys.